hundreds of schools, many of which actually shut down owing to and being unable to pay the bills, and of course some even turned into premises that were being rented out. Now those students now had to go and find other schools that they would join so that they can keep up with their education. It's a very complex issue, and who better to help us understand the complexities other than Ms. Mudheu Kasanga, the current national chair of the Kenya Private Schools Association. Welcome to the show, Ms. Mudheu.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's just get into it. What does it mean right now, that order? What does it mean right now for private schools per se?
Let us start what it means first for schools.
Yes, in general.
And the education sector. There was cessation of all face-to-face teaching. And this was as a result of this third spike in the pandemic, which seems to be more vicious than the first and second spike. I don't think we have been at the hospitalizations we have seen this round. So it is a common sense decision to stop large gatherings. And the timing of this spike coincides with Easter, coincides with the start of Ramadan, a period when we Kenyans gather in large numbers. Of importance to note is how, for instance, for us in the basic education, we had been closed for the national exam season. So the candidates, the Form 4 candidates, were exempted from this directive. Mm-hmm. But looking at the entire education system as a whole, universities were sent home, colleges were sent home, college students were sent home. But immediately thereafter, the colleges, both public and private, have been gathering to discuss how to keep learning going, because we are building up to the exam season for technical training and teacher training. Well, not teacher training, but technical training.
Right. And
the exams are coming up, the NEC exams and CASNEB are coming up in July. So the fact that we are all coalescing around online learning for this period is that this is what we call a circuit breaker lockdown.
Okay, explain that.
And that terminology, you need to sort of have it there. Mm-hmm. We are in the midst of a pandemic. We need to slow down that vicious and viral and, very escalating spread. We need to save lives. We need to make sure that the hospitals can cope with those who are going in. So what do you do? Looking at the rest of the countries, what they would do would come in with these short, sharp lockdowns that would contain the pandemic to enable the health system to cope. So for us, what it means as education is that we will be able to reopen in May, provided the adults in this country stay at home, wear masks, and sanitize.
Yeah, you've brought up
we have proved that education is not the super spreader event.
Yes, that is true. Now, you've brought up a very important issue of the adults, this being squarely in the hands of the adults. But let's get back to some of those lessons, or rather experiences, that private schools went through last year in 2020. We're having hundreds of schools closing down. As the head of the association, Kenya Private Schools Association, doesn't this put jitters in the hearts of your members? Because then, how will they keep the wheels turning? How do you address such a concern?
This is the point I'm trying to make. This ideally should be a short, sharp lockdown. Mm-hmm. It should not be like the first lockdown, where we didn't know what this pandemic was. We didn't know what it would bring to us as a country. Now we know exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. We have had that first wave, which was a learning curve. We saw how our children suffered. We saw how our girls suffered and continue to suffer and will continue to suffer. Mm-hmm. And so many girls have had their education curtailed. Despite our best efforts to get them to come back, their lives have changed irrevocably. Yeah. So we cannot go back that the losses are in education are generational. So we cannot do that again.
Yes.
And I will sit here and very confidently say that it would be a very big mistake for the biggest offices to imagine that you can keep education locked down for another prolonged period. Yet we have proved that education is not the super spreader event, and that we can manage our children safely when schools are open.
Okay, so as given what you have just said, does this mean that you are there any steps that you have taken in collaboration with the ministry to see that this is something that can be relooked at? Is that what you're hoping for? Because as it is, private schools have no option but to remain shut down, and given the e-learning that is an option, it is not exactly a viable option, especially in parts of the country that do not have the kind of internet access that we enjoy in, let's say, in Nairobi and urban areas. So how are you going to approach this? Is it from the government level engagement, or are you just trying to get the message out perhaps through the media that we are not the super spreaders and therefore this should not take as long as it did last year?
I think we are looking at this very differently. This is not March 2020.
Yes.
We now know what COVID-19 is. And schools would have remained closed anyways for 7 weeks. We would have opened in May 10th with or without this lockdown. So we have time within the current closure to sort out this curve as a country, so that we can make sure our children are not thrown back to that conundrum we had last year. And I think it is a thing we need to rally around to ensure that adults in society keep this curve down.
Absolutely. And
so for me, I'm looking at it slightly differently. I think you've seen how I am trying to this. Because for us, we have time. In education, we were closed until May 10th. And I believe the next 2 weeks are going to be the most crucial for the area in lockdown, the disease-affected area.
The counties, the counties that are under lockdown.
Yes, very dramatic wording in that statement.
Yes. Now, my next question would be then, given the fallout with the students that were pregnant, or the young people that decided they would go off and engage in economic activities, what do you foresee after this is done away with? Given that what you're hoping happens, and then things get back to normal soon, how do you foresee and do you think there have been enough measures put in place to ensure that we're not seeing a repeat of what happens to young girls and even young boys while they were at home? Even though it's just
we have done our best. We have done our best as the education sector, and really thank the Ministry of Interior for the collaboration in trying to reach out to all the affected students using the Nyumba Kumi network. And we've all tried our best, but our society is what it. And being a sub-Saharan country, our issues seem to be cross-cutting and are very heavily related to poverty.
Yes.
So education is a savior for so many children, and shutting it down, for a father, like beyond the 7 weeks, another father, is not anything anybody in government should even should even contemplate for the sake of those who are most vulnerable. And we've seen that vulnerability in the private sector. We've seen it in huge numbers in the public sector. It is a cross-cutting issue. So we need to always, right now going forward, just think of our most vulnerable. We need to prioritize the vaccination of teachers. I'm very disappointed that in so many health centers that this is not happening, that teachers are turning up and being told the vaccines are done, are finished, and there's just no prioritization on the queue system for teachers. We need to make sure our frontline workers are vaccinated. The sooner we can get this done, the better. And for us now that we have a bit of time on our hands after the KCPE exams, the bulk of our teachers are in their rural areas. trying to get these vaccinated, and it seems to be bringing in, like the method the Ministry of Health is using to get Kenyans vaccinated is not taking care of the priority list, is not using the priority list.
Okay.
So we need that pinned down completely so that we can make sure that our most vulnerable are safe and are able to take care of our young, vulnerable children.
Absolutely. And as we look at this from your point of view, but of course also from the view of public schools, do you think there should be some mitigating factors, given that it takes longer than those 7 weeks? What should parents, or teachers even, do to ensure that they keep up with the learning schedules and what have you, so that we're not lagging behind, or rather having an effect of, for example, last year when the students came back, they were termed as being significantly dumber, for lack of a better word, than when they had gone home. So, yeah, for lack of a better word. So,
learning losses,
yes,
learning losses,
yes,
learning losses,
yes.
learning losses. That's the word.
Yes, learning losses. How are we going to handle that this time round, given that we are now more informed, as you have actually said previously?
The calendar, the opening calendar, had factored in all these. So we open again in May, and we have a condensed term there, and then we start a new academic year in July, and we have a marathon year until the next round of exams. And this marathon year of 4 condensed terms will bring together all the gaps that we've had. I think I've spoken a lot towards the fact that Kenyans should not worry about the KCPE exams.
Right.
And whether our children would manage to do it as per, previous expectations. They will do it as per pandemic expectations, which is the same spot that all children on planet Earth are in. All children went through the pandemic. It's not just Kenyan children.
Yes.
So we have, I believe we have done, in East Africa, we have done a better job than most. Uganda is still having issues. They had elections in the middle of the pandemic and didn't have a minister for education and didn't even reopen fully, I think until February.
Right.
So for us in the East Africa region, we are okay. We are doing really well. We are the thought leaders in how to reopen education. And we are being praised Africa-wide on having a very smooth reopening period, and how we have managed to put in mitigation measures.
Ms. Mudeu, I'd like to interrupt you just a bit, and we apologize for that. We're having a bit of a problem with that audio. So as we fix that, let's take a look at this particular story. 4 teachers manning a Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education Examination Center in Rongo, Migori County, who were arrested on Tuesday, allegedly aiding in exam cheating, appeared in court. Meanwhile, Education CS Professor George Magoha has assured the country that marking of KCPE is progressing well, and that the ministry will ensure safety of teachers during the marking exercise of both the KCPE and KCSE. George Maringa has the details.
Rongo Law Courts in Migori County would play host for the 4 suspects a day after they were arrested over alleged involvement in examination cheating. The 4 include the center manager, supervisor, and 2 invigilators from Rongo Secondary School Exam Center. The magistrate issuing remand orders.
To be remanded at Kamagambo Police Station for 10 days.
We have schools that we are looking at keenly, we have schools that we have mapped out, and we are checking how they are behaving. We realize that a bit of problem arises from the deputy center managers, the deputy principal.
The arraignment comes days after Education CS Professor George Magoha warned school heads and those overseeing the national exams against bending the rules and engaging in malpractices. The CS gave assurance on observation of social distancing measures during the next phase of exam marking.
KCPE examination marking process is also progressing very well. As far as the multiple choice part of it is concerned, we are at about 60%. With regard to the safety of our teachers in where they are going to be domiciled, we have ensured that the COVID protocols are going to be observed without any fear of fever.
The 2020 KCSE will end on 21st April this year. George Maringa, KTN News.
Thank you very much, George Maringa, for that story. And hopefully we fix this audio issue with Ms. Mudeu Kasanga, who is the head of the Kenya Private Schools Association. Now, Ms. Mudeu, if you can hear me, you were midway explaining. I'll just allow you to finish your thought before we go into what you hope would be the ideal situation. We are actually a thought leader, as you said, in the region. But if things were perfect, how would you envision this country handling this pandemic, and what things have emerged that you'd like to see implemented so that it is smooth, even if we face a different situation such as this, even smoother? Let's put it that way.
If I were to sleep and wake up and have a wish,
yes,
it would be that all schools look like what the Kenyan international schools look like, where they were able to seamlessly go online and show us the possibilities of seamless learning despite whatever emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And that sector is being celebrated Africa-wide as well, because there are parts of Africa where even international schools didn't manage to go online as Kenyans did. But we are in Kenya. And the one thing we did, and I think the Ministry of Education did, is consistently consult with stakeholders on the best way to reopen safely and to figure out what are the minimum COVID requirements that we must force through the system so that we can keep children safe. At the beginning, we saw how very many teachers passed away because of the pandemic. And suddenly, we managed to contain that. And that is a very huge success on our part, and on the leadership that sort of guided us from the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, the multi-sectoral and multi-government agency that sort of gave clear guidelines on how the reporting structure, how to manage the pandemic in boarding schools, the public health and their input to schools. This was something we did brilliantly.
Yes.
And therefore, we managed the pandemic.
Okay. Okay. And as we conclude this particular conversation, would you tell us absolutely, or give a word of advice to those schools that might not be at a level where they can actually just survive, given that if in the event that we take longer than is anticipated or longer than can be managed with whatever they have in their coffers, what would you advise them to do? And for parents, if they're thinking in terms of tuition or trying to help their kids keep up with their education, what would you say to them as we continue on with this cessation of in-person learning?
One thing that the Kenya Private Schools Association did, again, that is being celebrated, is set up a platform for schools without the infrastructure. So where just a mobile phone can work, a teacher can teach online without, if the school doesn't have the infrastructure, they have the ability to log on to this massive infrastructure that we set up at the association to enable these schools that cannot and have not been able to afford to put in the infrastructure for online teaching.
Yes.
That remains one of our biggest wins this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And going forward, again, I can only appeal to the general public